Hi fashion lovers, you're welcome to another tutorial. In today's edition, we are going to be learning how to make a pencil skirt with hip enhancement and contour. So if this is what you're interested in, let's dive in. Alright, you first off go ahead and fold your fabric into two, just like what I have done now. Now to determine the amount you have to fold, I'm going ahead to mark my hip measurement. This is not the waist yet. The hip measurement plus my sewing allowance. That's how to determine the amount of fabric you're going to fold. Fine, because and now I'll go ahead and mark the length. I'm marking the length of this skirt now. I used 40, and in all I added extra 2 inches for the folding at the down part. Now at this down part, I'll go ahead to make sure I have that hip measurement plus my seam allowance before I will now cut. So after I cut this now, this is now going to be the amount of fabric I'm going to use to apply in my measurements. So I'm going ahead to cut it. At this point now, I'll go ahead and mark. So this line I'm drawing now is the starting point. So that's where we're starting our measurement from. So I'll go ahead and mark the waist to the hips. That first line is the waistline. So I'll draw the waist to the hips and I'll do the waist to the knee length. I'm having 19 inches around here and my full length is 40 inches. Full length of this skirt is 40 inches. Then I added extra 2 inches seam allowance. This is because I want to give it a neat finish in the inside, wherein the lining will be folding the main fabric like this, just like what you see. So as the class progresses, you're going to see and understand what I'm talking about. So this is the front now. I've gone ahead to measure all of that. Now I'll now mark my waist measurement, the waist I'm going to be working with, plus my seam allowances and my dart allowance. Yeah, so you also do that for yours. The waist you're working with, add your seam allowance and your dart intake. So I added a seam allowance of 1.5 inches and a dart intake of 1 inch. So the actual waist I was working with is 7 inches. That's 28. So do you get? So 7 inches, I added 1.5 inches for seam allowance and 1 inch for dart intake. So I've also gone ahead to mark my dart at the waist point. Now I'm marking the hip measurement, the hip I'm working with plus 1.5 seam allowance. Do you get? So that's what I'm marking here. And that 1.5 seam allowance, it is falling at the extreme end of the fabric. That's why you didn't see me mark it. So I'll be connecting from the waist to the extreme end of this fabric. Alright, around the knee area, I'll go ahead and minus 2 inches to 3.5 inches, 2 inches to 2.5 inches from what I have on the hip. So for instance, if I'm having 11 inches on the hip, I'll minus 2 inches or 2.5 inches from that 11. I'll be left with 9 inches or 8.5. Do you get? So that's how I mark my knee measurement. Whatever you have from the hips, subtract 2 inches from there and apply it on the knee line area and at the same and at the length of the skirt. That's the full length of the skirt. So if you want it a bit more pinced, more inward, you can do 2.5, 2 inches or 3. So but me, I'm just okay with this 2 inches. I use 2 inches all in all. So I'll go ahead and connect my lines. This is me now connecting the hip measurements to the waist, from the waist to the hips, and I've done also the same thing from the knee to the full length area. So at this point, I'll go ahead and first of all cut out that starting line, that first line that we drew, the waistline that we started from, and I'll now go ahead and cut out my marked point. Okay, so I'll go ahead and cut, and I will cut, and I will cut. Do you get? So this skirt is going to be having a neat finish inside. Now this is where the full length is stopping. I'll go ahead and notch this part because that's where the full length will be. That's where the full length of the skirt will be. I'll notch it so it will be easier for me when I'm cutting the lining. Now this fabric is going to be longer than the lining with about 2 inches. That's what you're seeing me mark there. The fabric will be longer than 2. It will be longer than the lining with 2 inches. So I'll go ahead and notch that area, and I'll go ahead and notch my center front. So the front part is already set. So this is what I'm having. Now at the center area, I'll come down by 1/2 inch and I'll connect it to the side seam area. This is because our waist is not that straight. Do you understand? Now I've finished cutting the front. I'll now place it on the back piece to mark out the back. Fine, I took a zipper allowance of 2 inches. So I'm making sure to be accurate with my 2 inches and make sure that it is all round. I'm marking a zipper allowance of 2 inches all round, and I'll place the front on that 2 inches. So I'll go ahead and still cut off that starting line. At this point, I'm not giving the back any slant at all. I just cut it straight out. Now from that 2 inches, I'll make sure I'm having 2 inches all round. Fine, these 2 inches now, we're going to be having exactly 2 inches on the hip area, but towards the waist, we are going to be marking 1.5 inches. So from the hip line, I'll come down by 6 inches, depending on the size of your client. You can also do 5, you can also do 4. So it all depends on what you want to create and how exaggerated you want this butt extension to come out from. Now, from the waist, I'll now mark 1.5 inches. 1.5 inches. That's what I'll mark for my real zipper allowance. Now, on the hip area, I'll be having 2 inches. From the hip area to that part where I marked 6 inches, I'm going to be having 2 inches. That's why I'm not marking it there, because I already have 2 inches already. So I'll now connect the other ones, mark 1.5 inches from the knee down to the hem of the skirt. So this is what I am having. Now for this part, I want to determine the slit of this skirt, like how open I want it to be. This is the actual full length. So from that full length, I'll mark 19 to 20 inches. That is almost on the knee line. Do you get? That's almost on the knee line that we'll have. So I'll go ahead and mark what I have and where I want the slit to stop. So this is also dependent on the client you're working for. If the person is a bit taller than this, you can also use like 20 to 21 inches depending. So around that part, I'll also mark out 1 inch. I want it to be 1 inch because I'm not going to be doing a cover slit. It's just an open slit that I will be doing. So I'll go ahead and mark 1 inch out of that 1.5 inches. I'll be left with just half inch. With half inch that I will use to turn the lining. So I'll go ahead and cut this out. So just watch closely, you're going to see. Now I'll come to the waistline and I will cut off that half inch that is left there, giving this hip. Do you see how I'm cutting it? The hip is kind of having its form around that zip area. So when I get to that 6 inches that I marked, I'll now curve it in to the knee line with the same 1.5 inches. I don't know if you understand, but just watch closely, you'll see what I'm doing. So I cut the 1.5 inches on the waistline, then I leave 2 inches on the hip line and then connect it back to that 1.5 inches from the knee line area. So this is how to get a butt contouring on your skirts, any type of skirts, whether mermaid skirt or pencil skirt. So far as it's a skirt that is going to be tight around the hip area and the waist area, this is how you achieve it. Now I felt like the easing allowance I left on that part, okay, I'm going to notch the main length and I'll trim off the seam because I felt it was a bit too much. 2 inches was much, so I used 1.5 inches. Then I'll now use half inch to sew it with the lining and I will be left with 1 inch for the knit finishing. Do you understand? So this is the part where the slits will be entering. I've gone ahead to trim it and I'll be having just 1/2 inch. So at this point I noticed it was still a bit bigger than 1/2 inch, so I had to trim it off and I left just 1/2 inch around that part so I can be able to when I finish joining it with the lining, it will just be open like that. Like it will just have the same effect with the front part. Do you get? So when I fold it in with the lining like so, I'll be having what I want. Now I'll go ahead to notch the zipper allowance area and I'll notch the dart area for the back piece. So this is what we are having. I'll now get our lining and I'll cut it out. So do you see how the back area it has been contoured? So now I've gotten the lining for the front, and I placed the front on it, and I'll go ahead and cut like so. And I'll make sure that the main piece, like the fashion fabric, is longer than the lining with 1.5 inches. That is that allowance that we left. So I'll go ahead and fold it in like this. Just watch closely. I'll go ahead and fold it in like this. Then where the fold is stopping is where I will cut. I told you that the fashion fabric is going to be longer than the lining piece with 1.5 inches. So by the time I use 1/2 inch to join them up, I'll be having 1 inch for the finishing, the knit finishing that I'm supposed to have. So I'll make sure I align this up before I cut. I'll go ahead and I'll cut this out. So do you see? So when I say the main fabric will be longer with 1.5 inches, this is it. Do you see where the lining is ending? And let me flip it to the other side. Do you see where the lining is ending? So when I stitch it in with 1/2 inch, this is what I'm going to be having on the main inside, on the inside. All right, I'll go ahead and cut the lining for the back piece. So, and I'll still do the same thing, like do the same trimming that I did for the front. I'll go ahead and fold it in like this, use my pin to secure it in place, and then I will cut off the parts that I'm not going to be needing on the lining piece. So this is what I'm going to be having. So if you cut off the lining like this, when you now stitch it in, you'll have exactly what you are looking for, and the inside will be very neat. Your linings will not be showing. So I'll fold it in and sew like this, and this is what I'll be left with. So at this part, I've gone ahead to join up the linings with the main fabric, and this is what I have. Exactly 1 inch. Do you get? So this is it. I'm measuring it to be accurate, and it is exactly 1 inch. This is for the front piece, and this is what I have. Do you see how neat it is? I've gone ahead to stitch in my darts on the lining and on the fabric. I stitched them separately because I wanted a neat finish. Do you see? So this is how neat it is looking, and I'll bring in the back piece also to show us what I have achieved. This is the lining. Do you see how neat it has been laid? Now this is for the back piece. Do you see the exact 1 inch that I told you guys about? So this is the exact 1 inch, and I'm gonna have to also mark the dart. Now for the waistband, I had a waistband of 3 inches. Then when I fold it in, I'll be having 1.5 inches. I'll go in and sew it in with 1/2 inch, and then I'll be left with 1 inch all in all. Mind you, it's going to be on fold. So this is how I'm going to place it on the back piece, slit it into two. I will stitch it before attaching the zipper. Do you get? Before attaching the zip. So I'll go ahead and slit this into two like this, and then I'll stitch it on each of the back pieces like so, and then I will turn it on. Do you get? I'll turn it to the other side. And this is what I have achieved after I made the waistband. I've gone ahead to put the waistband. This is for the front piece, and then this is for the front piece. I'll also be bringing the back piece to show us. Do you see how neat this is looking? So this is for the back piece. All right, at this point I'll go ahead and get my my tape, and I'll mark that part I told us for the slit, 19 inches, which but I later use 18.5 because this person is not a tall person. So I later used 18.5, and then I'll go ahead and mark my 1 inch zipper allowance. Don't forget, we use 1.5 inch, then we use 1/2 inch to turn in the lining, and we are now left with 1 inch. So I'll go ahead and mark that 1 inch, and I'll mark it all to the length of where the slit will be starting from. Then at this point now, I'll still go ahead and measure in where my zip is going to be sitting. So I came down by 11 to 12 inches because I want it very low, so it can be very accommodating to the butt also. So I will now stitch from this part that I mark now down to where the slit will be stopping. Do you get? And then the upper part, I will attach my zipper, and after I attach, I'll bring it in to show us what I have. All right, I've gone ahead to attach the zip, and this is what I'm having. So this is what I have. I attached the zip on the main piece and on the lining piece. So this is what I'm having. Do you see that contouring? Do you see how puffed up this part is? This is going to be accommodating the butt very perfectly. Now at this point, this is what the back of the skirt is looking like. I will now go ahead and bring in the front piece and the back piece, and I will shape this up. Like, this is just something that is so simple. So I'll go ahead and shape it up with my remaining seam allowances. Alright, fashion lovers, if you have watched this video to this point and you have not subscribed, kindly subscribe to this channel and turn on your notification bell so you'll be notified whenever I post a new video. And to all my existing subscribers, I love you all. You guys rock. Alright, so this is me now going ahead to shape it up, and I'll go ahead and shape this up from the waistline down to the hem area, and this is what my final result is looking like. As simple as ABC. You can make this skirt in less than 30 minutes. So this is what I'm having. This is the inside. You see how neat it is, and this is what I'm having. So this is the down area. You see how pensed it is, and this is what I have. This is the butt, the back, the butt accommodation, how it is sitting. All right, so this is it at this point. Whenever the person wears it, if my client wears this now, it's going to be giving a very neat, like a very fine fitting. And this is what the inside is looking like, how neat the linings have been laid. This is the inside. You see the neat finish that I'm having. Okay, fashion lovers, till I come your way next time, do stay safe and take good care of yourself. Bye. See you in my next video.